Our next presenter is Sam Volchenboum. He is the director of the Pediatric Cancer Data Commons, and he'll be informing in his presentation, describing that a little bit more. He's also the associate director for the Institute for Translational Medicine at the University of Chicago and the associate chief research informatics officer. I've really been impressed with Sam's efforts to wrangle pediatric clinical data, specifically clinical trial data. And his group is now harnessing an effort with pediatric brain tumor data. Sam, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can take it from here.
Okay, does that look okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, it's always fun to follow Deanne because she's one of the few people that talks as fast as I do. So I appreciate very much the opportunity to come speak here today. I'm excited to tell you about our Pediatric Cancer Data Commons work, especially as it relates to our brain tumor initiative and our work with the CBTN. And I'm going to start with an example of what I think one of the main problems that we all feel right now, but maybe you never stop to think about this, and that's that there's this incredible separation between the clinical world and the research world. And those of us who take care of patients live in this clinical care universe where we have our electronic health record and we have all the systems that go into the EHR, and that Epic or Cerner or EHR, it's a silo. You know, there are data in there, and those data are for clinical care. And if we want to collect data for research, those data have to be often manually typed into forms. They have to be it's a very cumbersome process to get data out of the clinical record into the research record. And these universes live very separately, and there's a lot of historic reasons for that. And a lot of the barriers to progress rise out of this historic separation of these two worlds. And this, I think, is the heart of the problem. And I didn't make this analogy up. This came from a talk I saw that Rob Califf gave, where he actually spent a lot of time talking about the separation and how we might bring these things together. You know, the root of all these problems, I think, are these arcane manual processes that we still live in. We still write our protocols in Microsoft Word. We send them around as PDFs. We handwrite our adverse event reports. We keep shadow paper charts and folders. We even have systems where when we put data into pharmaceutical companies' clinical trials forms, we use a separate laptop or a separate a computer for each one. You can see this, Becky Cush gave me this slide. You can see the usernames and passwords taped to the front of each of those laptops. That is for each bespoke pharma company's clinical record system. So this is just a terrible system. How can you possibly automate the reporting process or automate the orders process when you're dealing with these old-fashioned ways of collecting data? We have a pervasive lack of standards, or in fact, maybe too many standards. If we look in the Gene Expression Omnibus, which is an NIH compendium of gene expression data, this is all the ways that age is represented there. So if we can't do something as simple as call age the same thing, how can we possibly harmonize over much more complex variables that are related to things like brain tumors? On the right here is an example of just some very common things we collect, like height and weight or country. And again, there's many different types of systems and many different standards that are available. And if we can't agree on the standard or agree at least how to interoperate, how can we possibly share and interoperate our data together? A couple other issues I think that are key. One is the fact that we have an information funnel that is really hampering our ability to do research. If I want to do a clinical trial and I want to capture cardiac function, heart function for a patient, I'm going to capture a single number, their ejection fraction, and that's going to end up in the research database, this EF, or shortening fraction. Where did that come from? That came from a report which came from a beautiful 3D video echocardiogram. All of that is lost. The information is funneled down into the clinical trial system, and all I get forever then is this one number representing the cardiac function. What if I want to go back later and I want to study how the chemotherapy affected the patient's the valves or some other part of their heart? I don't have that information. So why don't we instead bring the video and bring the reports through automated methods into some sort of data commons so that we can save it and then use it in the future for other types of research? We also have a lot of loss of information transfer. We recently did a project trying to bring in reports for CAT scans and MRIs for kids with cancer. It turns out that the reports we got, the way that the reports came through was that the site had their report. That report was faxed to a central agency. The central group took the fax and created a picture out of it and sent us the picture. So we had to go to the picture and use optical character recognition and natural language processing to get the meaning out of the report. I mean, how backwards and convoluted a process is that? Why aren't we just receiving the free text reports automatically straight from the source? And this is the way that business is done. This is how we are expected to collect data for research. And again, the lack of standards for interoperability is the root of a lot of these problems. We have a lot of legacy transfer methods for all types of data. The current way that a lot of genomics reports are issued is that the cytogenetics lab, whether it's Foundation or Tempus or otherwise, they often send their reports back to the hospitals as a PDF or worse, as a fax. And then that hospital takes those data, and if they're going to end up in a clinical research study, a person will take that report and will hand type the data into a data collection form. So imagine not only the chance for error, but look at all the loss of information and rich data that could be transferred if we did this automatically. Why aren't there application program interfaces that allow us to pull data directly from the cytogenetics labs into our databases? Well, it turns out there are. If you go to Foundation Medicine, they have an API. You can get the data that way, but there's a lack of imagination and willingness of the players here to actually get the data out in these formats. And folks like Adam and myself and Allison and others are trying to think about better ways to incentivize these groups collecting the data to use these more modern methods of data collection and transfer. We have a big problem with all the different fields that are mapped in electronic health systems. Here are 20 or so different hemoglobin values that exist in an electronic health record. And yes, these are all mapped to these LOINC codes, which is this old tried and true system for labs. But if you're collecting a hemoglobin for a clinical trial, which hemoglobin are you going to collect? And how do you know? It takes a human expert to look through the EHR, pick out the right hemoglobin, and then copy it into a form. So imagine if you're trying to automatically map these values, you're going to be at a loss. So yes, lab values are standardized, but how can we hope to know which values we're taking when we collect them for a clinical trial? What are the standards for that when every single component here is called hemoglobin? All right, so how do we fix this? So data commons, I'm sure you've all heard many things about commons, and I think at the heart of it, building data commons are going to be a critical answer to these problems. What goes into a commons are having data that are all speaking the same language. You can combine them across sources and across different types. So the clinical data, the genomic data, the proteomic data, all those data can be combined. Because of how rare pediatric cancers are in general, we have to collect data from all over the world to ever hope to have the right numbers of data to do these types of research. A data commons platform would streamline the process for you searching and accessing and requesting and downloading data, and then even give you a place to have centralized workflows and analytics, much of the same work that Adam and others are developing, these beautiful platforms for analyzing and visualizing data. Instead of just using it once, this is how we can maximize, as Warren talked about, the data from every child can be used for more than one study, and we can derive the maximum benefit. So how have we tackled this in our pediatric cancer data commons? We realize there's this lack of harmonization across groups. This is as an example of what we did with our rhabdomyosarcoma colleagues. There were 4 consortia we worked with, 1 in the US, the COG, and then 3 in Europe. And what we did is we took all of their case report forms and tried to align them to come up with a single data dictionary that would allow us to interoperate between all the data. Well, this was not easy. The case report forms, some of them were handwritten, some of them were in, most of them were in Microsoft Word or Excel. So we spent hours. This took us almost 2 years to develop this data dictionary with many, many meetings where we went line by line and looked at every single data element to come to consensus. But once we had consensus, we could build a common data dictionary. But this is expensive, time-consuming, meticulous work, and it involves a lot of meetings. Of course, now these meetings are on Zoom, but one day they will again go back to these in-person meetings where people get very passionate about these data standards and what we're going to include and what we're going to call the different stages of chemo and the different sites of disease. But if you really go through the work, you can actually get consensus among the various groups. This is exactly what we're doing with our new brain tumor, our new CNS data commons consortium, of which CBTN is part of, is starting to build out a data dictionary with partners from all over the country and hopefully all over the world, where we can build a set of standards that everybody can agree on. This is an example from again from the rhabdomyosarcoma. Each column here, the CWS, the COG, and the EPSSG, they had different ways of cataloging the site of disease. Bless their hearts, the EPSSG had so many different sites. They had a site of disease for upper lip and lower lip and tongue, whereas the rest of us just had face and head and neck or oral cavity. So we had to work very closely with these groups to try to come up with some way, some scheme of having a way to represent site of disease that everybody could agree on, that we could all harmonize our data to. And this took many, many sessions. But what you end up with then is a harmonized list of sites that everybody can agree on. So this is our finally finished harmonized data dictionary. This is the head and neck section for rhabdo. And these are the sites that everybody has agreed upon, so that when data are collected now at any of these consortia, they will use these sites of disease. Now, something else critical here is that we've mapped to standardized codes that represent these sites. There are many different ontologies and sets of codes. We've chosen to work with the National Cancer Institute's thesaurus, their set of codes, and they have these C codes. So if you look up this C code, it takes you to a website that shows you eyelid as a site of disease, and it has all of the description and the details. And so now I don't have to worry about somebody misspelling a site or misspelling a kind of disease. I have these codes, and these codes are universal. Anybody in the world who has the codes now can actually represent represent the site or the stage or whatever we're talking about without worrying about language problems, because we're all using the same code set. Now, sure, somebody could have a different ontology. They could be using CDISC or OMOP or Mondo or ICDO, but it doesn't matter because there are ways to interconvert between these code sets. The important part is that we've achieved consensus on the different elements, and we map to these standardized codes. So now this is the full picture. You have a common data dictionary. Now you can do two things really easily, or not easily, you can do them really well. You can harmonize old data that's been collected. You can take the last 5 or 10 or 20 clinical trials from all over these groups, all over the world, and you can harmonize them into the standard and put them in as an aggregated set of data. But going forward, you can now incentivize these groups as they collect further data to use these data elements, so that when they collect new data for studies, it's much easier to get into your data commons so that you can aggregate it. And then the thing we're doing that we're very proud of is we're working with the NCI to integrate our standards that we've developed with this international consensus into the NCI's data dictionary, so that future work where people go to the NCI for a resource will leverage the work that we've done, so that future data can be collected in the same format. So we've built a cohort and discovery tool. We have neuroblastoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, and several other data commons that are now coming up online. You can do a very discrete faceted search, showing just an example on the left, looking at, say, all the patients that are stage 4 neuroblastoma that have survived, and it'll show you instantly the number of patients. And then you can also have a visualization where you can instantly look at survival curves. You can stratify over different variables. And again, we want to make this publicly available. There's no protected health information here. This is all information that everybody should have access to for discovery of cohorts. And then if you really want to get at the data, you can apply for the data. You can download the data with the right kind of approval. The other thing we're doing is we're working with groups like the GDC and working with Adam and Allison and their group to connect, so that you can take a cohort that you discover in our rich clinical data set and link it directly to the genomic data or other types of omics data that are available throughout the Cancer Research Data Commons. So we're very excited about the prospect of bringing these data sets together. So, we get updated outcomes data on our patients for Children's Oncology Group. So why not use those data alongside the genomic data that have been collected? You have a much richer set, a much better chance of making discoveries on the data that you have. This is our overall integrated picture now. So we have built or we're building about 10 different data commons. The CNS data commons just got named 2 weeks ago, and it's coming up online. We've had many meetings, and we're now starting to build out the data dictionary. And as I mentioned, CBTN is a very active partner in our Inspire consortium. We are now seeing this not only as a set of data commons, but as a integrated set of data commons where somebody somebody could come in and search over many different disease types. They could then perform all sorts of analysis over those data, and then importantly, link out to those other data sets like I mentioned. And then we have a whole set of work groups that we maintain, everything from data dictionary development to governance to young investigator engagement, training, education, and so forth. And anybody who's interested at all in working with us, we'd love to have you be part of our groups and love to have your involvement. We have a structure now where we have these commons, we have the work groups I showed you, and now we're launching some global scientific advisory committee and an external advisory board that can really help us now think about the work we're doing on a global scale, how we can look at underdeveloped areas of the world, and how we can really think about bringing these standards to a much broader group. This is our leaderboard, which is on our website, and I only put it up here to show you that we have a very well-established pipeline of engaging stakeholders, working on the data dictionary, getting consortia together and getting memoranda of understanding, and then harmonizing the data and putting those data in the commons. We won't touch data until we have a data dictionary and a way to harmonize it. We're very passionate about the standards and making sure that the data are all aggregated correctly. And of course, as I mentioned, we're often running on our CNS tumor commons. We have some initial funding for this. We're going to be applying for further funding, and we hope to continue to build with an international group a data commons for clinical data for CNS tumors. We're working with groups all over the world, of course. We definitely need to work harder to get more groups involved from South America and from Africa, and definitely trying to push further into the groups in Asia that are developing. But we're very excited about our international partners. And then this is my last slide, but I think going back to the beginning, I think standards can really help us achieve this, this unified one universe where we not only have the clinical data being collected, but we also have things like real world evidence, wearables, sensors, patient-reported outcomes, and have all those data flow into these data commons in automated ways as standardized data. And then you can feed your clinical trials, electronic data capture systems, or feed your research systems. I think some version of this is what's going to emerge, I hope, and I hope that these silos, these separate worlds now can come together. All the work done today is by our growing team of data standards experts and project managers and governance experts, and we continue to build, and we're always looking for more help, and we always have jobs posted for data scientists. So please come and join us if you see the opportunity. And then our funding has been really foundational funding. We recently had some National Cancer Institute contracts, but most of the work has been very generously funded by the foundations listed here. All the slides I showed today are at the link at the bottom there. They will be there perpetually, and I will also send them to Angela so they can be distributed. We're having, I can't believe I didn't put a slide in. We're having an open all commons webinar next week. We're going to have probably 150 people there. It's going to be hopefully as big as this meeting. And if anybody's interested in information about the webinar or want to be on our mailing list, please let me know, and I'll stop and take questions there. Thanks.
Sam, I do think you spoke faster than Deanne, so that was impressive. I think the work that you are doing is incredible. I've been privileged to be involved. And the one thing I'd like to point out with one of the slides that you just showed is, as is often the case with brain tumors, we are trying to be very ambitious. And so that one slide you had other disease, like specific diseases, and we are really trying to tackle the entire brain tumor cohort. So instead of a disease within the CNS cohort, obviously with your team's guidance, we will do it disease by disease, but our whole goal is to really harness and capture clinical data, trial data, along with the real world data, and have the two interconnect.
Right, which is why we're trying to build the data dictionary all together at once, so that we don't have any pockets where we have to then extend the dictionary later. I think that's a really smart move on your guys' part, is to build this data dictionary as a single CNS dictionary entity.
Before we segue into with the next presenter, if there's any comments, or Adam, if you see anything in the chat.
Nope, just again, Sam, you're highlighting really the diversity of stakeholders it takes to pull all the pieces together. And I think the combination of your data dictionary work, and really, I think you're sort of the becoming a gatekeeper into the diverse clinical trial network data. And I think you were trying to implicate this gently, but clinical trial data has not historically been easily accessible, integratable. And I think a lot of the work that you're doing is really going to empower it to intersect with the kind of real world data and trials data that CBTN, PNOC, and other groups have brought forth. So again, kudos to what is a monumental social engineering and informatic effort.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Adam. I really appreciate it. Thank you.